represented here in this group, to advance biomass and to increase their share in the overall energy portfolio. But all countries also have mentioned that there is a need for further assessment of the resource potentials, and we have a quite diverse group, so it's not a surprise that there are different levels of current knowledge and capacities to do so. In terms of the main requests coming out of this first session, there was agreement that we do not want to focus only on agricultural residues, but also other feedstocks, and that a key goal would be to learn how to accurately assess the bioelectricity potential. There was also a priority to learn about data sources and indicators that are important for the resource analysis, and to distinguish between auto-generation and distributed generation, on-grid, off-grid applications, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. In session 2, then, we turn to we looked a little bit deeper into alternative energy pathways, and we looked particularly into the social and economic impacts of these pathways. Of course, these resources are not supposed to be harvested just for their own sake. We do this because we hope to see social and economic benefits to arise from them. So we were looking into that. And in terms of the current situation, what we found there is that all countries already have some biomass capacity. This might be a very, very small portion, in fact, but all countries have some experience to share. There's at least one installed, at least one ongoing, or at least one planned biomass energy project. So we're not starting from scratch. There's some experience in the countries, and we've shared these experiences before, or you have shared them with us, rather. The main request coming out of session 2 was that you were hoping, or we were hoping, to learn better how to assess and communicate not just to assess, but to communicate the social and economic benefits of bioelectricity. What are the indicators to measure them, and how then can those outcomes, believing that is the right key component of moving forward in countries, how can this better be communicated? So it's seen as necessary to in order to effectively compete with fossil fuels and renewables like solar and wind energy, which often have lower generation costs. It's important to develop such an assessment and communication strategy. Next slide, please. That should be already session 3 today. Session 3 today, we're having a few more information on our slides here, so to set our focus right. One key part of the session will address financing, and from our assessment, what we have seen, looking into the information that you have provided with us and doing some desktop research and speaking with you, all countries target investment for renewable energy projects, and some single out the role of biomass as part of their renewable energy strategy. So investments in renewables and investments into biomass are supposed to go up. That's the crux of this, of course. How is this best being done? Countries are all interested in improving their investment environment to see these investments happening. So the question is then how to de-risk investments. What are the right de-risking strategies to see more public and private, and to see more domestic and international investment happening into bioelectricity? The main request here is to discuss how to ensure sufficient financing, and there's a whole number of sub-questions, and this list could be longer than what we put on the slide here, but it's basically starting with how to do an investment risk analysis, and once you have the risk analysis, how to address the existing risks, what are targeted measures, what's the right policy mix to reduce barriers and create enablers for investments. What are working business models for different applications at different scale? What financial products are necessary? And then a question that comes up not just in this community of practice, but that everybody seems to be wondering about today is how to actually get your hands on all this international funding that has been promised, either through the Green Climate Fund, through using convincing NDCs, through NORMAs, and so on and so forth. And a specific focus for many is the question how to create an investment prospectus for biomass energy, a project pipeline that can be used and can be put in front of potential investors and funds. So that's a whole set of first issues that are going to be discussed at our session today. Next slide, please. The second part, I don't want to talk about parts evasion, but second component of questions and challenges that we're hoping to address in the session today is then the question of policies. Policies, of course, are creating the enabling framework, are improving the investment environment. All of our renewable markets or energy markets overall are, of course, policy driven. So smart policies are key to advancing bioelectricity, at least at scale. The current situation is that the majority of countries have at least one form of a policy. Usually it's an incentive, usually it's a tax incentive for biomass. So for example, in Colombia, a country that is represented in this group, we have income tax exceptions for 15 years after the investment has been taken. In Uruguay, there's a net income tax exemption. In Brazil, there are tariff discounts of 50% and more for transmission and distribution. In El Salvador, another country represented in our community, there are tax exemptions for the profits that have been made from emissions certificates coming out of bioelectricity projects. So there's a whole range of different ways to do tax incentives, but we found that those are in place in many countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, including in some who are represented in this group. And then there's auction feed-in tariffs, and they are usually for other renewable energies, not for biomass. But it's an important question maybe that we can discuss today is whether auctions be a valuable instrument to advance electricity, and if so, how do they have to be set up so that they do not or successfully compete with the source of electricity. So the main requests here in this area are to address how states can integrate policies and measures into the existing legal framework in a country. And that's, of course, one of the challenges we have. We have a small number of countries represented in this group, but still the legal frameworks are, of course, very diverse. And so at the workshop, we're hoping to do this really one-on-one and discuss these questions more individually. But I'm sure we're going to touch on this very question of how to integrate targeted bioelectricity policies with the overall legal framework. And then there's a great interest in discussing alternative concrete policy instruments to tax incentives or to feed-in tariffs. So what are alternative policy instruments that can effectively facilitate the introduction of both small and large scale bioelectricity projects? So those are some, not exclusively, some issues that came up when we analyzed policies in Latin American Caribbean countries for bioelectricity. Then we turn to my last slide here. The third component of this theme of policies and financing is the governance and administrations. We have found this over and over again in our work when we were working with countries on their energy strategies, that very often they have good targets in place, they have smart policies in place, but then where it all fails is in implementing those policies in working in cost-effective administrations. One example is you might have a great feed-in tariff that makes the investment environment attractive in theory, but then in practice you have a permitting process for a project that might take years, that's very intransparent, that has 15 or more stages in some of the countries we've looked into, and therefore the project becomes very risky or unattractive. So the current situation, it's an important topic. So the current situation that we see here is that all countries have a ministry or an agency dedicated to the governance and regulation of bioelectricity. That's good. That's not the same everywhere in the world. There is a number of countries still that I've visited where this does not exist, and it's very unclear who is supposed to be the pilot on bioelectricity policies. So in the countries we're working with, this is usually the case, even if you can argue that resources are to some extent lacking. But there is a dedicated ministry or agency usually in the driving seat to move forward policies and implement them. There is few countries, however, an example would be Pro Biomasa in Argentina, that have initiatives that are dedicated specifically to bioelectricity. So while there is a home, there's not necessarily yet an initiative or a program that's moving forward bioelectricity. So hence we come together in this community of practice, of course, to change that. Most countries do not have a NAMA with a focus on biomass, though a NAMA would be a very effective funding tool if you want to get your hands on international finance. This is only spotlights here. We could dig deeper into NDCs. We could look into what is going to be prepared currently for in terms of applications to the Green Climate Fund. We could look into the individual national energy policies. But this is, I think, a relatively good introduction of sort of the current situation here in these countries. There is willingness to move this forward. There is some legal frameworks on which to build bioelectricity policies, but in most cases, apart from tax incentives, such a broad dedicated program does not yet exist. The main requests that we have seen in your surveys and from our research are that in order to create effective cooperation, there needs to be more in order to create these effective programs, there needs to be more cooperation between the ministries and agencies, and not just the one that is has the lead on designing the policies, but also the finance ministries and many other agencies that need to be involved into the policy making process. So how do you create mainstreaming is an important issue here, which I'm not sure whether we can touch on it today, but we will then at the latest at the workshop. To streamline the permitting process, I mentioned the ineffectiveness of many of the renewable permitting processes in some of the countries we've worked in. How do you streamline it? How do you make it effective? How do you make it transparent? How do you make sure that it's not a risk in itself, but an enabler of good projects is another really key topic in this area. And one way to do this, for example, would be to create a one-stop window, and we can talk a little bit about this. This is some work that I've done myself, so in case we are not touching on it in the presentations and you want us to address this in discussion, I can jump in there a little bit as well. So that was a wrap-up of the sessions 1 and 2, as well as an overview of what we see is the current situation in countries and some of the main requests. I'm sure there's many more that come up in the discussion. So with this, let's turn to it. Can I see the next slide, please? Oh yeah, this is the in-person workshop. We're going to speak about this towards the end of the session. So let's turn to module 1. Just a second. So this module is going to be about you. We want to hear from you as we enter the discussion, where you see your country standing. Let's dig a little bit deeper into what challenges you have, so that our presenters later on can maybe address some of these challenges in the discussion. I think we're going to start with Argentina, which has a prepared presentation. And I think we're going to see one from Jamaica. I've seen in slides from Jamaica at some point as well. I think those are 2 prepared presentations, and then I would, after those prepared presentations, go around the virtual table that we have here in the midst of us and ask others to share their views, who don't have slides, but who we still want to hear from, how they see the situation. So with this, I would like to turn over to Argentina, Federico Moyano and Marina Solanas. The floor is yours. I want to give those who have prepared presentations maybe 10 minutes for the presentations, and then we go around the table and then we open the discussion if that's agreeable. So Federico and Marina, over to you.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well. We can hear you very well, Federico.
Perfect. Thank you, Alexander. Let me start with a brief introduction. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to comment about the new legislation that we have in Argentina. This has passed through the Congress last year, and it was approved and regulated by the government, by the current government, a few months ago. So this new legislation created a new scenario for the renewable energies in Argentina. When we compare the current situation with the last 3 to 4 years, we can see that there is a very different environment and much more attractive for the investments in the renewable energy sector. And this is because, first, the macroeconomic situation of the country is changing. The new government is giving better investment signals to the investors, and also because of this new legislation that I'm going to comment about right now. This new law is the law 27-191. It's a law that promotes the installation and development of renewable energies in Argentina. It established a goal based on percentages of the total mix of energy that is generated in the electricity matrix, the grid, and it is a progressive goal starting from the year 2018 with an 8% of the total mix of generation coming from renewable sources, and going to, in a progressive way, to the year 2025 to reach 20% of the total energy, electricity coming from renewable sources. Right now, the current situation of the electricity matrix in Argentina is that we have only 1.8% of the electricity generated from renewable sources, and the idea is to take it in a very short time, in a very short period, no longer than 2 years, to this 8%. This is in a broader context this is the goal for the broader context of renewable energies in general. But when we talk to the specific goals that we have in Argentina for the biomass and biogas energy sector, we can talk about the objectives set by the ProBiomasa program. These goals were set when we were conceptualizing the program as an AMA, and in this NAMA we set the goal to reach by the year 2030 a total of 2,700 megawatts of installed capacity coming from biomass and biogas sources, and that's going to be like 20% for electricity purpose, and the other, half of it for electricity generation, and the other half for thermal generation. Next slide, please. Well, here you can see, going back, yeah, thanks. With this goal in place, it means that Argentina will need to install in the next 9 years, at least 10,000 megawatts of installed capacity coming from renewable sources. This is quite an ambitious program, but the government believes that if all the correct signals are given to the investors, they will be able to go this path successfully. Next slide, please. Here I'm going to mention a few main aspects of the legislation. As I said before, it sets a mandatory target for 2025. This is, as I said, also a pretty ambitious goal, but also realistic ones. These are in line with most of the goals set by the neighboring countries in the region. Another important aspect of this legislation is that it allows large consumers to source directly from renewable energy sources. This is, large consumers in Argentina will be able to sign PPAs directly with renewable energy generators, and that's from all renewable energy sources: wind, solar, biomass, geothermal, small hydro. It also introduces strong fiscal incentives to the energy generators. Within this new legislation, they will be able to reduce significantly the impact of the taxes in many of the most important taxes that are affecting right now the investment projects in Argentina. So this is a very important tool of the legislation. This law also creates a financial specific trust fund that will be used by the investors in renewable energy projects, and this fund will be able to not only to finance the investment of the project, but also to work as a guarantee fund, giving the investors the security that they will be able to receive the payment that the government promises with the PPA contracts. So this is also very attractive for investors, and this has been shown or experienced already with the auction that has been launched, the first auction under this legislation. I think it's important to comment on the results of this auction. This auction was launched 2 months ago. The idea was to contract the energy generated by an installed capacity of 1,000 megawatts. The government received the proposals from different investors, and the reception was for over 6,500 and 300 megawatts. And last week, the government opened the offers, and they granted PPA contracts to 1,100 megawatts of installed capacity from different sources. One interesting thing to mention is that within the mix of different proposals, of different sources of renewable energies, the most important one was the wind renewable source, and second place was the solar. Among these two sources, they completed almost 95% of the total allocation. When we focus on the biomass and biogas sector, we can see that the succeed was not that impressive. Actually, it was quite reduced, the amount of projects that were presented to the auction, and this is mainly because the conditions set by the government on this auction were quite restrictive for the biomass and biogas projects. So altogether, there were presented about 10 to 12 projects from biogas and biomass sector, and most of them were of very reduced capacity, amounting for less than 60 megawatts in total. But well, the successful was not that good of this first auction, but at least it's a first step and a good signal for next investors in the biomass and biogas sector. Next slide, please. The previous two slides I comment were related to the broader aspect of the renewable energies, and now focusing on the biomass and biogas sector. I would like to talk a little bit about the Probiomasa program. The idea of this program is to promote this is, first I would like to say that this is carried out by the government. Two ministries are involved, the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Agriculture, with the assistance of FAO. And the idea and the goal of this program is to promote the generation of electricity and energy from biomass sources. There are many different actions that have been carried out by this program within the three main components that form part of it. One is the institutional strengthening, the other is the bioenergy strategies, and the third one is the awareness and capacity building component. Within these three components, many different actions have been taken, carried out, especially with the purpose of assisting the projects in moving forward in the development of their projects, of their initiatives. Within the institutional strengthening, the national government is trying to help or assist the provinces in creating their own institutions and their own capacities to promote locally the development of projects. Within the bioenergy strategies, this component deals directly with the projects, helping them in different aspects of the development of the project. And the third one, the awareness and capacity building, it's creating among producers, among public institutions and public in general, the feasibility and the potentiality of Argentina within this sector. So this program has been very active and carrying on a lot of actions and policies, implementing policies regarding the biomass and biogas, electricity and energy in general sector. Next slide, please. Can you give a new click so the yes, yeah, thanks. This is just a brief comment about this tool, this trust fund that is proposed and designed by the new renewable energy legislation. It creates, as I said before, it creates a fund called FODER. That's the name of the fund. The intention of this fund is to use the government funds and also funds coming from the electricity bills. So part of the demand will have to finance this fund, and the idea is on one hand to finance the development of new projects, and the other to provide guarantee to the project investors that they will be receiving the payment, the tariff that the government is promising with the energy auctions. There is a complex system, sophisticated system that allows them to be sure that these tariffs that are being granted through the auctions will be in the end paid by the government. So, as I said before, this is a very interesting tool, a promising one, but since it's very new, we have not had experiences yet. So we cannot mention about the real experience, concrete experience that happened with this tool yet. Next slide, and the final one. The next one, please. Oh, yes, and this final slide, I just want to mention briefly about the investment barriers that the bioelectricity projects are facing. As I said in the beginning, most of these of the barriers that we had 2 or 3 years ago are being somehow disappearing because of this new regulation, because of the new macroeconomic environment that is going on in Argentina, and also because of having a new administration in place. So, but there are still some specific restrictions that are being faced by the bioenergy projects, as opposed to the wind and solar projects. One of them is there is a restricted access to international financing and foreign investment. This is changing, as I said before, but is still complicated for small and medium-sized bioenergy projects. We believe that in the short term and until local macroeconomic conditions normalize, this barrier could be mitigated with international climate finance. That is why Probiomasa is conceptualizing and proposing the program as an AMA, and it will be presenting it to the Green Climate Fund to access to the financial climate finance sources. The other barrier that these projects are facing is the low availability of local financial resources. This is quite general for the whole economy, but some projects are now being financed by local institutions, and those projects are the most known one, of the most common one, like expansion of companies or infrastructure projects. When we talk about bioenergy projects, since they are quite new in Argentina, there are few experiences. The financial institutions are quite reluctant to open new lines. So there is a need to create knowledge and awareness within the financial institutions, and that is part of the job that Probiomasa is doing with them. We are somehow providing them, creating the capacities, the technical economic characteristics of, letting them know about the technical economic characteristics of these projects, so they can better understand them and evaluate them, not as a high risky project, but as a potentially good, feasible and technical economic projects. And finally, there are favorable financial conditions for investing in bioenergy projects. This is basically because, well, there are in first place, as I said before, local small resources, a small amount of resources, but also those resources that exist, those banks that are lending money, they are setting very restrictive conditions, and they are not favorable to the bioenergy projects. So the idea within the NAMA of Biomasa is to access to the international financial climate finance to use those funds as a leverage to local funds, and in that way try to improve the financing conditions of the local banks by reducing the interest rates, extending the repayment periods, and also helping with the guarantees of that the banks, the local banks are requesting from the project. So this is more or less a brief description of the situation, the policy and financial situation in Argentina. And well, I think that's from my side. Now we can hear what Marina has to say from her side. Thank you all, and I'm open to questions or comments on this regard.
Thank you very much, Federico. This was a very dense presentation, and you shared a lot of the insights with us, and in terms of the existing policies and in terms of also remaining risks and barriers, and we can have some time more to discuss those later on. Marina, I see you have signed up as well. Marina Solanas, also from Argentina. Is there anything that you want to add at this point before we turn to the next country?
Yeah, I think it will take just 2 minutes. Thank you very much, Alex, for your introduction and presentation, and thank you very much, Federico, for giving such great details on our new plan for renewable energy. So just 2 comments. In terms of the encouraging new regulation that we have for renewable energy, I think that in terms of wastewater treatment plants, what would also help is a distributed generation regulation on a national level. There are only 4 to 5 provinces that today have distributed generation laws enacted, but it's not particularly those that have wastewater treatment plants with anaerobic digesters in place. Most of them are not the ones that have this distributed generation regulation in place. So I think that this project of law that is going on these days, and hopefully it gets enacted by the end of this year, will really encourage the development of energy projects at wastewater treatment plants. They are large consumers, and a good point also on this law that Federico was explaining is that large consumers need to take 8% of their electricity consumption from renewable resources. That is something that would encourage wastewater treatment plants to have their own generation plants, but also this needs to be it would be better if they also counted on a distributed generation regulation, or at least net metering, so they can also have some economic incentives. And on the flip side, I think that other advantage that bioelectricity projects have as opposed to other kinds of renewable energy is that we also generate the second product that I just ate. And I think that still in Argentina we have very weak or inexistent regulation on this side. It would be very good for us that we had greater gate fee prices for sludge disposal, for example. So wastewater treatment plants would be encouraged to do something about their sludge reduction, which can be accomplished by anaerobic digestion, or also if the wastewater treatment plants have had a more feasible to comply with regulation on their sludge disposal. Many plants, we don't even know what is that they're doing with their sludge. They don't have an appropriate regulation to comply with. We're just coping some of the concepts of the U.S. EPA for sludge disposal, which is not something appropriate for our region. So both higher prices at landfills for sludge disposal and appropriate regulation would also encourage co-digestion and cogeneration projects at wastewater treatment plants. I think we have a great landscape with this new regulation for renewables, but in the particular case of bioelectricity, we're still lacking of an entire side for the second product, which is the digest state. And of course, in the case of other kinds of waste, it would be the same for the disposals at landfills. I think that's everything I have to say by now. And I would be very glad if you could share with me from any other countries if you had any experience on these kinds of initiatives that could also help from the digestate side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marina. Very helpful comments from your side as well. We'll see whether we get to those questions that you raised in the discussion and other community members have anything to add at this point, or otherwise we're going to prepare to answer these questions at the workshop and move those forward with you. We have another prepared presentation which I'm hoping Phil can pull up now, and this is from Jamaica. We have with us Betsy Bandy and Nicanor Rees. Welcome. I give you the word in just a second, but I wanted to give Ignacio Figoli from Uruguay and also Cesar Granados from El Salvador a little heads up. We didn't receive slides from you. That's not a problem at all. We know you're all busy. But there's a couple of questions that I would like to ask you after this prepared presentation, and one goes towards investment risk analysis. And I want to ask you what the sense is that you have, or do you have a sense of what working business models in the given environment could look like, and also what are some of the financial instruments, the credit lines, the loans, etc., that you know project developers are asking for? If you have a sense about this and you can share some thoughts regarding this, it would be great. So that's on the investment risk analysis side, given the policy environment that actors work in. On the policy side, I would like to ask you to share your thoughts on what you believe could be policies that can improve the investment environment and what you're working on, what the current status is on those. So just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up that we're turning to you after the next prepared presentation, which is now from Jamaica. So dear Betsy and Nicanor, I'm not sure who's giving it. Over to you.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yeah. Good morning.
Yes, thank you guys again for the opportunity to participate, and you know, and it was a good opportunity to meet some of the members of this community over in Panama about 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half ago. Just to let you all know that we got back in okay, and we thank God that the hurricane didn't really hit Jamaica. You know, it just got some rain, and you know, thank God that was it.
We're happy to hear this. Thanks. Thank you and good luck.
All right, thanks. All right, so with respect to, you know, what Jamaica is doing with respect to bioelectricity development, you know, Betsy and I put together a presentation, and she may have some comments after. All right, could you move to the next slide, please? Now, what basically is supporting renewable energy and, by extension, bioelectricity and development in Jamaica is really the national energy policy. which was promulgated in 2010. And this is a broad policy that speaks to you know, how Jamaica is supposed to develop its energy infrastructure in general. Now, within that policy itself, there was a target that was set of 20% for renewable energy into, you know, the general energy mix. Now, with respect to bioelectricity, there wasn't not necessarily pointed out exactly how much bioelectricity would contribute to that particular, you know, component. It was just renewable energy in general. Next slide, please. Now, there are a number of sub-policies that were developed. And if we speak specifically to bioelectricity, then some of the policies that would speak directly to that would be the renewable energy policy, the biofuels policy, and the carbon trading policy, and also to some extent the energy from waste policy. Now, there was also developed a national energy action plan, you know, which would basically outline some of the strategies in terms of achieving some of the goals under the energy policy. Now, surprisingly, or well, not surprisingly, bioelectricity or bioenergy was not given high importance. You know, a lot of the emphasis was placed on some of the other renewables, such as wind, you know, solar, and hydro. Although within our renewable energy mix, bioenergy within itself was contributing a very significant component. Next slide, please. Now, the biofuels policy basically outlined that, you know, we wanted a modern, efficient, and diversified, environmentally sustainable biofuel sector to contribute to Jamaica's long-term energy security goal. You know, and we all know that biofuels within itself provides a lot of social and economic benefits because of the involvement of rural communities and so on. However, a lot of emphasis within the biofuels policy was placed more on fuels such as, you know, ethanol and you know, biodiesel, and to some extent sugarcane bagasse. Next slide, please. Now, we also see the waste to energy policy as a good policy that can help drive bioelectricity, given that a large component of our solid waste is organic. You know, a lot of the bio component is very large, in the region of 60 to 70%. So we believe that policy can also help to drive some amount of impetus as it relates to bioelectricity, you know, inclusion into our energy mix. And, you know, there are several challenges in terms of implementing bioelectricity from solid waste. And, you know, these are some of the things that really have held back that push. There is now a new push to rework the policy, and it is ongoing as we speak, to really get a project implemented on the ground as it relates to, you know, solid waste. Next slide. So from a legislative and regulatory framework perspective, there are a number of policies. So there are policies in place, and there are policies being reworked and so on, you know, such as our national energy policy, the biofuels policy, and so on. But I believe what we are lacking is somewhat the will to actually implement components of the policy, or maybe we need to go back and have a second look, you know, to see what is missing within the policies, why bioelectricity is not being implemented. And, you know, from some of the earlier presentation and some of the things that Alexander outlined, I realized that Fortunately or unfortunately, Jamaica is not the only country in this kind of situation. And I've seen where other countries have, such as the presentation earlier from Argentina, where specific focus is given to bioelectricity. But within our context, a lot of what is being done is general, and then bioenergy have to compete with everybody else when it has its own unique challenges. Next slide, please. So, in terms of incentives that support, bioelectricity, as pointed out earlier, we don't really have an incentive that is specific to bioelectricity. A lot of these incentives that are outlined are, they are for renewable energy in general. So our promotions company, which is called JAMPRO, Jamaica Promotions Limited, is the company that is entrusted with responsibility of, bringing investment into the country. And the investment for energy or renewable energy by extension is also a part of their portfolio. And they outline a number of things that the government have done to facilitate investment. And by investment, we mean that bioelectricity would also benefit from this, although it was not specifically tailored for bioelectricity. And some of these incentives includes full duty and GCT exemption for importation of machinery and equipment used on the project. And there's a number of years, which is negotiable. There is accelerated depreciation benefits, which allow for write-off of capital costs associated with acquisition of machinery and so on. And there are also concessionary rates that government give for land, to put these projects up. So there are some things which can assist these projects to get implemented, and some of these are captured under what we refer to as the omnibus legislation. So the government is doing some things, and they're trying to put certain incentives and so on in place. And also we also have the Petro-Carib Development Fund, which is a fund that facilitate funding projects that are associated with renewable energy at very good interest rate. And some of the renewable energy projects that have been implemented within the past 2 to 3 years have actually benefited from this fund. But a lot of these projects are not bioelectricity projects; they are wind and solar projects. But the window still exists for the bioelectricity projects. Next slide, please. So, I said earlier that the biomass account as it relates to renewable energy is very large within the wider energy portfolio. And as you see, as it relates to renewable energy, in 2010, biomass account for 81% of the total renewable energy resources that we had, that contributed to our energy input. Fuel wood accounted for approximately 57%. We did another study in 2014 that looked at the fuel wood availability and consumption, in the country. So it's really significant. However, it does not get the kind of attention as some people would say, more sexy renewable resources. Next slide, please. So given the fact that biogas is one of our largest source of bioenergy, a lot of emphasis have been placed on that, to get bioelectricity being produced from biogas. And some of the facilities locally do produce some amount of electricity, but all of it is consumed internally, and none is exported to the grid. And some of these facilities still have to import energy into the process. And a lot of the biogas is consumed inefficiently. So Jamaica developed a sugarcane adaptation strategy, which included bioelectricity production and offtake, to the grid. And a number of targets were set. But unfortunately, the sugar sector within Jamaica is very challenged, to put it mildly, because of a number of issues related to global challenges as it relates to sugar prices, our own internal issues with respect to retooling the plants and upgrades and so on. And fortunately for us, all the sugar factories are now private, because the government went through some sort of a divestment process a couple of years ago, and all the factories are now in private hands. However, this did not really help to improve the bioelectricity push, because even though the divestment has occurred, we haven't really seen, there's only one facility that is looking to put about 5 megawatts of bioelectricity into the grid, and it has not happened as yet. So the objective of the sugar adaptation strategy was to improve cane production by 3.5 million tons by 2018, and this would provide enough, bagasse for cogeneration and to meet other biofuels requirements such as ethanol and so on. And in so doing, meet a number of objectives with respect to sugar demand locally and so on. So it was a really wise strategy, but the implementation of that strategy has not been very good. Currently, we are less than 2 million tons of sugarcane annually, which doesn't help the bioelectricity push. All right, next slide, please. So, our general focus, as I pointed out, has been on the sugar sector. And maybe we need to rethink that focus and maybe broaden the focus from a policy perspective, to other bioresources, that we need to look at. But the whole sustainability of the sugar sector, as I pointed out earlier, is dependent on a number of things, and the current decline in viability is impacting the sector negatively and the rural areas within Jamaica. And unless something drastically changes within the next 2 years or 2 to 3 years, I don't know, if our bioelectricity goal as it relates to that sector is going to be achieved. Next slide, please. I keep going. There are a number of that slide was animated. Okay. No, could you go back one? I think let's go back one slide. All right. So there are a number of challenges and barriers as it relates to implementation of a bioelectricity program locally. From the sugarcane point of view, looking at using bagasse for bioelectricity, the challenges that we face have to do with low productivity at the estates. The harvesting methodology, in that harvesting the cane while they are burnt, you lose a lot of the biomass. How the factories operate in terms of their inefficiencies and the kind of technology that they currently have, so they need significant upgrade. There is also issues as it relates to the rates of financing, but I believe that might have improved somewhat. But there is also a challenge with the regulations as it relates to pricing mechanisms. What has happened is that within the sugarcane sector, they are paid for sugar, basically. So, there is no mechanism for the farmers to benefit for sale of electricity or any other byproduct that comes from the sugarcane production. So that is one seen as a barrier. Next slide, please. Now, from the waste to energy perspective, trying to utilize some of that bio resource, there's not enough information in terms of studies and so on to really guide the process to look at the economic viability of doing this. It is also pointed out that the capital investment is very high in putting in these plants, and we have looked at some scenarios where just producing energy from the waste would not make the facility viable. So we need a number of things in terms of tipping fees and characterization studies. So there's a lot of technical knowledge need to be gained here to properly guide any sort of project as it relates to waste to energy. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we need to action would involve, looking at the financing mechanisms, doing the studies, and from a bioelectricity point of view, we have to look at what are the alternatives. We have been focusing primarily on, sugarcane. Maybe we need to widen our focus and look at the other resources that are there. We also need to look at our municipal liquid waste. That is one area that we have totally neglected. So, these are just some of the things that we highlight, and I don't know if Betsy have any other comments. Thank you. All right, that's it from me.
Thank you, Nicanor. Betsy, share any comments on your behalf?
Hi, good morning. You're hearing me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Hi, good morning. I think if we look back at the issues of MSW or urban waste, I know that the country is interested in doing projects from that, and we're currently reviewing the draft policy, and also any RFP for waste to energy. We are thinking of doing a separate RFP because we have now come to the conclusion that waste to energy cannot compete with the other renewables, and it should not be within the same tender. The tender for the RFP for waste to energy should be separate, considering some of the challenges. But the government is really going to the public for all renewables, including waste to energy.
Thank you very much, Betsy. Is that it from your side? It's stressing a point that Nicanor made, so did Federico. Really, the big challenge that bioelectricity has to compete with other resources, though it has its own challenges, and so you need specific incentives and you need specific tenders or RFPs to for specifically targeting bioelectricity. Very important point. Thank you for emphasizing this again.
And that's coming from the political directorate.
Yeah, absolutely. So
it will be. I believe it will be included in the short future in any policy initiative or directive going forward for RFPs for waste energy or any additional renewable energy.
Yeah. Great, thank you very much.
Yes,
we have
welcome.
2 more countries. By the way, I've heard from Carlos Corubello from Cuba and some of the representatives from Costa Rica that they had some travel issues and therefore sent their apologies that they couldn't join. And we're also a little bit behind in this module already, which is really gives some credit to the very detailed presentations that we have received now from Argentina and from Jamaica. Both of which are really pointing in the same direction, to the point that now Betsy also emphasized again. What are these specific incentives that can move bioelectricity forward. There are broad programs, there are targets, there are goals that governments have set. They are committed. They have set at least the basic governance structures in place to implement policies. But now, what are these policies? What are these concrete investment barriers that still exist? I think we might agree that some have been through what has happened in the past, have moved, have been significantly decreased, but there are remaining risks. And what are these concrete that we should discuss? I hope we can turn to these in the next two modules, but I did want to give Ignacio Figoli from Uruguay a chance to, if he wants, to make a few points regarding what we've just heard on the situation he sees in Uruguay. What could business models that are working look like? What are some of the financial instruments? Are they there? Are they lacking? And also, what are some of the specific existing policies? Let me see, Ignacio. Ignacio, are you there? I see you. I see your name, but it says offline. Maybe you have, I think we had some problems with your microphone in the past. If that's the case, we've also been joined by Carolina Hernandez. Carolina Hernandez from ICE, from the Costa Rican Electricity Institute. Carolina, the last thing I want to do is put you on spot here, but since we have you, we're talking about existing investment risks and the necessary financial products, as well as the necessary policies that address investments in bioelectricity and can improve the investment environment. Do you want to say a few words from your Costa Rican perspective? Carolina, can you hear me? I hear something. Carolina, is that you? If that's not the case, or if it is the case but you have technical problems, then please save your comments for the discussion. Yes, I can hear you now.
I think you can hear me. Okay. Well, during for the financial issues in Costa Rica, we are the same as we were talking a few weeks ago with Betsy and the other Jamaican friend. So we don't have that much progress in the government part. The banks are asking for a lot of guarantees, and the loans have high interest.
Mm-hmm.
I just connect, so I haven't heard about the other countries, but what we remember, or what I remember from our conversations last weeks in Panama, were like we were pretty the same in the financial sector.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Carolina. We'll have a chance to dig into all these questions in a little bit. I suggest, and I'm seeing Ignacio is back. Hello, Ignacio, do you hear me? Do you have a microphone to respond? Ignacio, are you there? Can you take part in the discussion? All right, that doesn't seem to be the case at this point. Maybe that's getting better. I saw you as offline before. Now you seem to be online again, but maybe there's the opportunity to participate because of some technical issues. We have a great, interesting module ahead of us, and we have a fabulous speaker, Camila Ramos. Camila is the founder and managing director of CELA, and CELA stands for Clean Energy Latin America. At CELA, she supports clients in developing investment projects in renewable energy in Latin America, and she does have a focus on many of the different components of a comprehensive strategy. She works on the legal framework. She works on overall developing energy strategies. She shares market intelligence. She helps clients with fundraising and project finance. So she has many different perspectives and to share on many different clients, and I'm sure she's going to give us a great introduction to the second module. Before she founded CELA, Camila was at Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and she was responsible for their Latin America research. She was also a marketing and communications manager for a Brazilian renewable energy company and research coordinator for another company in Brazil. So Camila, it's great to have you. We have 5 countries here who will be listening to you. Some of them represented with more than one representative. We have Argentina, we have El Salvador, we have Jamaica, we have Uruguay, and we have Costa Rica. So with those pilots of their countries on bioelectricity listening to you, please give us your introduction and we turn to a discussion afterwards. Camila, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well, Camila.
And I'm sharing my screen right now. Can you see my screen, the cover of my presentation?
It's on slides from the Clean Energy Solution Center, and
yes,
it says Best Business Models for Bioelectricity Project. Yes, we see it in front of us. Perfect, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon to some of you, depending on where you are. My name is Camila Ramos, and as Alex just introduced me very kindly, I work at a company called CELA Clean Energy Latin America, providing financial advisory to renewable energy companies and projects in Latin America, especially in Brazil. I also am an expert at the Clean Energy Finance Solution Center, and this service that we're providing today is part of that service. The Clean Energy Finance Solution Center assists governments and practitioners with identifying appropriate finance mechanisms and also designing and implementing policies to reduce risk and encourage private sector investments, helping to achieve the transition to clean energy at the speed and scale necessary to meet local development needs, and also to address global challenges. The Clean Energy Finance Solution Center is an expanded and dedicated resource that is part of the Clean Energy Solution Center, a clean energy ministerial initiative that helps governments design and adopt policies and programs that supports deployment of clean energy technologies. The Clean Energy Finance Solution Center has 3 primary offerings. The Ask an Expert program offers no cost and high quality and objective expert assistance from some of the world's top experts in clean energy finance, who offer personalized consultations to government policymakers and select practitioners. The second offering is a centralized portal that enables users to search for and access tailored and concise information on existing and innovative finance instruments and initiatives. It's a database that highlights clean energy finance measures, resources, and partner organization services. Using this information, decision makers can distinguish among finance instruments, understand policy implications of each, and determine which are most useful. And finally, a web-based training from clean energy finance experts and organizations that provides insights into clean energy finance programs and best practices. It's designed in collaboration with global partner institutions, and these webinars engage a diverse global audience in interactive discussions on important clean energy finance topics. So if you're interested in learning more about the services, I'm available after this webinar as well to tell you a bit more.
So to start our presentation, I'd like to start giving an overview of the Brazilian power matrix and show you the importance of bioelectricity in Brazil, and then how we got there. Bioelectricity is the second most important power source in Brazil, following hydroelectricity, which is the largest. Bioelectricity represents 8% of Brazil's power matrix. Most of the biomass here in Brazil that we use for bioelectricity, around 76% of it, is sourced from sugarcane bagasse, so very similar to our colleague from Jamaica. It is a residue from Brazil's sugarcane, sugar, and ethanol industry, but also, and most recently in the last 4 years, planted forests, especially eucalyptus, as well as other non-traditional biomass sources, such as energy cane, biomass sorghum, and elephant grass, are increasingly being used in Brazil for power generation. This is because the availability of bagasse is decreasing, and the competitiveness of these other alternative non-traditional biomass sources is increasing rapidly. In 2015, bioelectricity generated 47,394 gigawatt hours in Brazil. So bioelectricity is mainly used in Brazil for substitution of fossil fuels, so substituting natural gas, fuel, oil, and diesel with biomass, for supply of growing electricity demand in the country, and for operational optimization of existing assets, cogeneration assets today that are not competitive or are not efficient, but are being increasingly optimized for maximizing the use of the biomass and also electricity production. The main business models for bioelectricity here in Brazil are cogeneration, so electricity plus heat production for self-consumption. So this is mostly in the sugarcane industry, but also in the paper and pulp industry. Cogeneration for self-consumption of the heat and then sale of the excess power to the grid. Power production exclusively to export either to a direct client through a PPA, a power purchase agreement, or to the electricity grid, and usually and mostly in Brazil, and the trend and the bulk of it is sold through renewable energy auctions. And biomass pellet briquette production for final sale to a client that will burn it to produce bioelectricity in its own boiler. Brazil has a centuries-old traditional sugarcane industry, so this was the first driver of the use of bagasse and biomass for bioelectricity production. Sugar was and still is one of Brazil's most important export industries since its colonization. But other main drivers include the ProAlco, the national ethanol program that was the largest program in the world for substituting gasoline after the oil shocks in the 1970s. And as all the ethanol in Brazil was produced from sugarcane at that time, the growth of the ethanol industry resulted in large amounts of available sugarcane bagasse in the country. Initially, this leftover bagasse was used to generate power and heat for the sugarcane industry and the ethanol industry, but later bioelectricity became a business for itself, as it is today. In 2012, the Brazilian automotive industry launched flex fuel cars in Brazil that could run on either mix of ethanol and gasoline, giving another important push for the growth of the sugarcane industry in the country. As the industry became larger and then more profitable, more bagasse biomass was available in the country. The industry started investing in improving the cogeneration boilers within the industry. This was another important driver. Then in 2004, the government then launched the PROINFA, the National Alternative Energy Program here in Brazil. It was a short program. It's not in place anymore, even though the projects are operational. But it created a feed-in tariff for alternative energy sources, around 3.3 gigawatts of renewable energy sources, and of that, approximately 1 gigawatt was to be awarded 2 bioelectricity projects in the country. In 2007, the Brazilian government started promoting annual renewable energy auctions in Brazil, tendering renewable energy, including bioelectricity, through 20-year PPAs to be signed between bioelectricity projects and utilities. These auctions provided and still provides the most important driver for bioelectricity projects in Brazil today, no doubt. These projects are financed mostly by the BNDES, the Brazilian Development Bank, which provides financing for practically all the projects that sign these PPAs in these renewable energy auctions. The PROINFA, so the Alternative Energy Program, was created by a law in 2012. It had the objective of increasing the participation of alternative renewable energy in the Brazilian power matrix, so small hydro, wind, and bioelectricity, giving priority to projects that had no participation from concessionaries, either generation, transmission, or distribution. The cost of the program, whose energy is contracted by Eletrobras, the government-owned utility, is paid by all final power consumers, so in the free market and regulated consumers that are connected to the national interconnected system through an increase in their energy bills, except for low-income consumers. The subsidized cost of the PROINFA is divided in monthly quotas collected by distribution and transmission companies, and then these are transferred to Eletrobras. To give you an example, in 2014, PROINFA's cost was approximately $1 billion. The goal was to contract 3.3 gigawatts of renewable energy PPAs, and in the end, it ended up contracting 685 megawatts of bioelectricity alone, and the majority was contracted by wind, 1.4 gigawatts. The PPA terms in the PROINFA were, as I mentioned, 20-year PPAs with a very attractive feed-in tariff, a floor guarantee of 70% of the contract revenues for the period. Guaranteed financing from development finance institutions such as BNDES, Banco do Brasil, BASA, BNB, which is Banco do Nordeste, and CEF, the Caixa Econômica Federal, offering up to 80% of leverage to these projects. And these institutions, these development institutions, ended up providing 6.21 billion reais, or approximately $3 billion, to all of these renewable energy projects from PROINFA. So renewable energy auctions are still a main driver of bioelectricity in Brazil and globally. This is a graph from Bloomberg New Energy Finance. Auctions or tenders, they have become a trend in renewable energy policy, and many countries in the world use them today to contract renewable energy capacity. Brazil has contracted over 15 gigawatts of renewable energy projects since 2006. Public tendering has contracted over 7 gigawatts of bioelectricity projects alone in the country. These auctions are very attractive to bioelectricity project developers and investors because they provide long-term power purchase agreements and therefore a long-term stable cash flow to these projects. Prices are fixed. In Brazil, these prices are indexed to inflation, which is great, but they are not indexed for exchange rate. So foreign investors or investors looking for foreign finance then find this not ideal. These are examples in this graph of the results of bioelectricity auctions in Brazil. Recently, prices and volumes contracted have been increasing, as you can see, and approximately 600 megawatts of new bioelectricity capacity is contracted in Brazil every year now. The increase in the amount of bioelectricity being contracted in Brazil is a result of the government desire to attract more thermal capacity in the country to balance with the increasing amount of wind power, which is intermittent, that's being contracted in Brazil in parallel as well. So we are seeing now recently even a bigger push towards bioelectricity thermal projects here in the country. And this is done through organizing these renewable energy auctions and with attractive ceiling prices for the investors participating in the bid. Wood, as you can see here, I'm showing a bit of the participation of wood that has been increasing in Brazil. So as I mentioned, eucalyptus forests planted exclusively for power generation, it's becoming more and more of an important source of biomass in Brazil, instead of only just the sugarcane bagasse, which used to dominate bioelectricity in Brazil. Now I shift a bit of to sources of financing. So you can see here a graph by the World Bank that shows the suppliers of capital to infrastructure projects in Latin America and the Caribbean between 2011 and 2015. So as you can see in this graph, talking about Latin America and the Caribbean in general, and infrastructure in general, not just energy, commercial banks are the main lenders in the region, with 38.6% of all the lending to infrastructure projects in the region. Then they're followed by development banks, such as the BNDES, with 16.8%, followed by developer equity itself, 12.5%, followed by investment banks with 6.6%, then by utility equity with 3.7%, then by state or national banks with 3.6%, then by export credit agencies with 3.5%, and finally the other classification, which includes pension funds, EPCs, private companies, and multilaterals. This other graph, also from the World Bank, now shows the amount and sources of public and multilateral finance institution support, now specifically to energy project finance in Latin America and the Caribbean between 2011 and 2016. There are multiple entities, as you can see in the graph, with different mandates and governance structures taking diverse strategies. So we have development banks, we have ECAs, we have multilaterals, we have infrastructure financing facilities. Examples here, the BNDES that I already mentioned, the Brazilian Development Bank, is the largest supporter of energy project finance in the region by far. It finances practically all the energy projects in Brazil due to the subsidized financing rates in the country, main driver of bioelectricity investment in the country. OPIC, the third largest in financing in the region, is the U.S. Government Development Finance Institution. It offers debt financing, insurance, support for private equity investment funds, and 9% of OPIC's renewable energy commitment is in biomass. Its focus is on the Central America Energy Initiative, on the Caribbean Energy Security Initiative, Mexico, El Salvador, Peru, Honduras, Panama, but they offer supports to practically all countries in the region. To be able to access OPIC's financing lines, at least 25% of the project must be U.S. owned, so have a U.S. equity investor involved. Other examples are the IFC, which provides supports to sustainable infrastructure and has a focus on climate. And here you can see another table by the World Bank, and now showing which are the most important commercial banks that are providing financing for projects in the region. Brazil is the most prominent country in terms of deals done and amount booked, with 34% of Latin American Caribbean total loan market, followed by Mexico with 28%, then by Chile with 12%, then Colombia with 7%. Brazil's Banco Itaú is followed by Chile's Corpbanca as the largest financier, followed by Colombia's Bancolombia, then by Brazil's Banco do Brasil and Banco Bradesco, followed by Panama's Banco General, and finally by Mexico's Grupo Financiero Banorte. So a bit more on the BNDES to show you its mandate. It's 100% state-owned under private law. It was founded in 1952. It's a main provider of long-term financing in Brazil. It's a key instrument for implementation of the federal government's industrial and infrastructure policies. So it does have local content rule requirements to be able to finance projects. It focuses on infrastructure, It supports micro, small, medium-sized companies as well as large. And it has no capital origin discrimination, only local content requirements. Between 2003 and 2015, the BNDES has approved the following credits just specifically for the bioelectricity sector. So it has financed 2.5 gigawatts of capacity, bioelectricity capacity from 48 projects. It's provided $1.1 billion of credits to these projects and enabled total investments of $2.1 billion. And finally, about BNDES, this table shows specific the financing line that is available today for renewable energy projects in Brazil, including bioelectricity. This information can be found on BNDES's website, which is updated regularly every time that the mandate changes. So the financing line for bioelectricity is called FINEM, Steam and Renewable Energy. The BNDES finance cost is the TJLP, which is Brazil's long-term interest rate, which is currently 7.5% per year, plus a BNDES remuneration rate of 1.5% per year, plus BNDES fees of 0.5% upfront, and plus a risk spread of 2.87% per year. As you add up these numbers, the financing costs may seem high, especially compared to multilateral institutions, for example. However, because the financing line from BNDES is in Brazilian reais, and the PPAs, the power purchase agreements in Brazil, are in Brazilian reais, the final cost is much lower than financing from a multilateral institution that offers financing in US dollars, and then the project's entrepreneur would have to add the cost of the currency hedge, which ends up making the final cost of a multilateral higher than the BNDES cost in reais. However, if your country offers PPAs in US dollars, for example, or indexed to the US dollar, then multilateral banks become much more competitive. And this is the case of basically many countries in the Latin American region. The BNDES provides a maximum leverage of 70% of eligible items to the project. It is 80% for solar PV projects specifically because solar is a new industry in the country and the country is now subsidizing solar more than other technologies. Its capital amortization is 18 years, and it offers an interest and capital grace period of 6 months from COD, the commercial operations date of the project. And it requires a minimum debt service coverage ratio of 1.2 times. So finally, we move on to investment and financing barriers and risks in the bioelectricity sector in Brazil and Latin America, especially looking on the financing side. So foreign exchange rate exposure and currency volatility is one of them. Country risk and credit worthiness of the off-taker is a very important one as well. And low prices and tight returns of projects are also a very important barrier that prevent a lot of the financing to get to these projects. So to tackle these barriers, here are some suggestions in terms of the project and in terms of the regulatory framework of how to tackle these risks or these barriers. So in terms of the project, it would be important to have a sponsor or investor with a proven track record in project implementation, and more specifically in project implementation of bioelectricity, of the same technology that we're talking about. Equity available for potential cost overrun, and also a balance between debt and equity. So not only a project be looking for debt, but at least 30 to 20% of equity available, plus the cost overrun. It's important for our project to have a clear implementation strategy, a professional financial model, which is not the case for many of these projects, a well-managed development costs and OPEX, it's also essential, a bankable PPA, a bankable power purchase agreement, a capable EPC, engineering, procurement, and construction company with a financial capability to back warranties, credit-worthy off-taker or customer, and this is key, and mitigated country risk. In terms of regulatory framework, it would be very important to have a predictable and stable regulatory regime for renewable energy and for FDI in general. And this is, I would say, the number one requirement, of predictability and stability of the regulatory framework. Regulations favorable to renewable energy, so RPSs, auctions, etc. Stable political and economic environment. Currency risks can be mitigated economically, so this is something important. And transmission systems quality and access. I'd just like to end mentioning the presentation from our Argentinian colleague. And this is a very good example, a great example of how to mitigate country risk. And that's the recent, very successful example of the renewable energy auction that just took place in Argentina, where it was oversubscribed in a country where there was practically very, very low investment in renewable energy. And especially even their World Bank, if I'm not wrong, guarantee that is provided to investors in the case of contract default. So the country made sure that it studied several methodologies and policies that would be being used in other countries for auctions to be successful, and managed to implement it quite successfully. This was especially for solar and wind, but it would not, the actions that were taken to make sure that the auction was successful and oversubscribed could be used for bioelectricity as well. So thank you very much. This is the end of my presentation, and I am available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Camila. This was absolutely excellent. Great insights that you shared, very specific to the region. Great insights from Brazil. I want to make sure that you know that we have the Secretary to the Minister, Eduardo Azevedo, as a member of this group. Very busy person, obviously, but a great supporter of this initiative. He hasn't been able to share his thoughts to the group yet, and so it was fantastic to get your insights on Brazil, but well beyond that, very, very helpful. I'm pretty sure others will agree. You ended up with some comments regarding Argentina. So to start the discussion, let me turn it back to you, Federico and Marina. Do you have any comments on what Camila presented on the situation in your country? I have worked on Argentina a little bit myself, and I know that currency risks were often mentioned as a great problem in your country. It's good to see that Camila has some solutions to how to deal with them. There's other risks, obviously, in Argentina if we look into the weighted average cost of capital there, but currency costs were always seen as one of the front-running risks and the very crucial risks that need to be addressed. So Federico, Marina, do you wanna comment on this? And then after this, we open the floor to everybody else who has questions or comments for Camila.
Hi everybody. This is Federico. No, just a small comment. First of all, I appreciate Camila's presentation. It was very, very good, very clear, and very enlightening for us. Regarding the currency risk that you were mentioning, and as Camila mentioned on her presentation, the fact that Argentina has set the US dollar as a currency payment for the electricity auction, it's somehow taking the risk out of the question. So this is going to reduce the general risk of the renewable energy projects. The fact of having a international currency, the fact of using an international currency for the payment of electricity in Argentina, the US dollar. So no, I don't have any further comments. I think that the presentation was very clear, and And I agree with Camila that Argentina is in line with the main policies that successful policies that have been carried out in the region, very similar to pro-infra situation in Brazil. So that's for me.
Thanks very much, Federico. Marina, I also see that you have a question. I see it in the question pane, but I can't see the question itself, and it only tells me that it's unanswered. So, if it's a question to the group as a whole, then please use your time right now to ask that question as well, and to maybe add some comments if you have any.
Sure. I didn't actually write my question in the chart. I'm not sure, but I did have a question for Camila. So thank you very much for such a detailed and good presentation, Camila. The only thing I had to add to Federico's comment is that even if Argentina committed itself to make payments for the new licitations that for this new renewable energy plan we have is in dollars. As far as I'm aware of, I think that we are going to pay 118 bucks per megawatt hour generated, which to me sounds too high. I think we are still absorbing some risk of the country itself, regardless of the currency, with this large prices we are committing to pay. So my question to Camila is if she's aware of the last price that was committed to pay for the last biogas project generation.
Marina, I don't know about the biomass or the biogas project. I can check and then send it to you later. But I know that the final wind price was $49 per megawatt hour, and for solar it was $59. So prices were lower than expected.
Yeah, sure. I think that's much cheaper than what we are committing to pay. And I also heard that in Chile, the last solar project was only $29 per megawatt
Yes.
hours. So still, I think that $118 per megawatt hour is too high. And I'm wondering that, I don't know, maybe this is not related to the currency issue, but still is related to the risk that Argentina is perceived with.
But you're mentioning that this is for the biogas project specifically, right?
Correct.
Yes, then it would be probably the technology cost, because the cost for the different technologies, the final results for the different technologies ended up being very, very different. Like I mentioned, the wind with 49, and then the solar with 59. So.
Yeah, you're right. I know that wind and solar projects were licitated at a cheaper price. Yeah, right. But I don't think we are close to Brazil prices, anyways. I think we were around $60 to $90 per megawatt hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We are a small enough group, so I don't think I have to overstress my role as a moderator, so please jump in. I know that there's two members who want to make comments, so let's start with those, but then I'm pulling back as much as I can, so please feel free to just raise your voice when you think it's a good moment. I want to start for the moment, though, with Nicanor. I think you raised your hand, Nicanor.
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to comment on the whole issue of the currency risk that Camila outlined. I just wanted to know, what were some of the other countries doing in terms of mitigating, the currency risk. I know that here in Jamaica, what has happened is that a lot of that risk is basically passed through, because the typical household electricity utility bill have a currency exchange rate charge on it. So basically, your rate fluctuates. It is compensated for. So the consumer actually pays, the equivalent in terms of the exchange rate. So that kind of protect the utility company. So I don't know if that similarly exists in other jurisdictions. Anybody, can comment on that?
My 2 cents would be in Brazil, we don't have anything to, as I mentioned, to deal with that. But because it's such a large market, I mean, we're auctioning 3 gigawatts per year of renewable energy PPAs. It's a 20-year PPAs. It's a very interesting market for investors, and the government provides this BNDES financing. It's very subsidized in reais. It's been working here just because of that. But in other countries that are being very successful, like Argentina that we mentioned, is in US dollars, Chile in US dollars, Uruguay, I believe we have a colleague from Uruguay as well, it's, the PPAs are in US dollars as well. In Peru, the same thing. So countries that have been that I can think of that have large renewable energy programs and auctions that have been successful have been doing it indexed somehow to the US dollar to make it more less risky for investors, and then attract also foreign financing.
Yes. But what I also wanted to point out was that it's in US dollar, but the person who actually pays for the electricity, that consumer, they pay in the country's currency. So that leaves the burden on the utility if you're not
Exactly.
a compensation factor.
Exactly. You're shifting the cost and the risk from the investor that is participating in these auctions to the consumer in that sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Ignacio, I see you have your hand raised. Please, the floor is yours if you want.
Hello for everyone. Very good presentations, Camila and Argentina, Jamaica. Let me talk about a few minutes about Uruguay. I think that Uruguay have a juridic security and clear rules in the long term, and a energetic politic that all the political groups are involved in the long time. That's key. And when we talk about energy, we talk that's a strategic objective for all the government. I think it's very important the interministerial coordination. We talk about environment, energy, transport, different ministries to satisfy the principal objectives that the political energy aims. In Uruguay, we don't talk about subsidies or feed-in tariff. We talk about a PPA. That's the most important is that UTE, that is the public company, was and is the principal brazo ejecutor. I don't know how to say in English, but that's a key, very important, because that gives to the company, to private companies, stable in the business in the long term. Otherwise, the public banking, like Banco de la República Oriental del Uruguay, is co-participating in the financial logistic. That's important because we have a local public banking in the support of this energy strategic. But I think that we have a big challenge. You talk about solar and wind energy that is falling down the prices. Here in Uruguay, when we talk about wind energy, we talk about $62 per megawatt hour. When we talk about solar energy, 70, 80 dollar per megawatt hour. But when we talk about biomass, bioelectricity, it's more expensive. We all know that the bioenergy have external social and environment external issues, but I think we all that we work in bioenergy, we must democratize all the information so the community knows the big impacts in the social. We know that biomass energy have the most important employment in the sector, and it's a big issue in all the gases efecto invernadero. But we must know that all the community must learn, and we have to give more information to the community. I think that's for it.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. So again, the problem in Uruguay seems to be, as in other places, that the generation costs are higher for bioelectricity, at least for in the situation of on-grid settings and at utility size than they are for other resources, and that creates challenges, of course. We all have discussed at length during the first two sessions about what the societal benefits are, on the other hand. So there is a strong incentive for still for leveling the playing field, so to speak, so to still advance bioelectricity. Very good point. I have Federico, and then I would like to give Camilla a chance to wrap up and address maybe what Ignacio said, maybe have a short wrap up from her point of view about what are the most effective policies. You had a long list of barriers and very concrete suggestions for how to address them. But now, taking another minute, maybe towards the end of this module, to sum up what you believe needs to be done in the countries that we have heard from now. Then my suggestion would be to make a little bit of an adjustment to the agenda and turn it over to Kai for his presentation, and then another round of discussion without any further breaks in between, if that's agreeable. I know you're approaching lunchtime. I don't want to risk that we're losing attendees. I want to make sure Kai gets the attention and he can be of best assistance to everybody in the group through his expertise, and we have enough time to do that. So for now, want to turn it to Federico. Federico, did you have anything to add? And then after that, back to you, Camilla, and then back to me.
Okay, thanks, Alex. This is just a small clarification regarding the results of the first auction concerning the price, basically. The average price offered and granted, awarded to the wind projects is around $55 per megawatt hour, and the average price for solar projects is around $60. $118 was just the price for one small project, biomass project in a landfill, and the prices or the mean the mean average prices, the average prices presented for biomass projects were around 130, 140, while the maximum was set 110. That's for biomass, and 160 US dollar per megawatt hour for biogas. So that's why most of the biomass and biogas projects were not granted. There are a few that are renegotiating right now with the government, trying to reduce their offers, the price offered. According to what I have heard from these project developers, a few of them will accept to reduce their offers and will get into the action being granted also with these PPAs. So we'll have at least 3 or 4 biomass projects within this first round of auction. That was it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Federico, for the clarification. Camila, back to you.
Thank you. Just to wrap up, I think for me, and living here in Brazil and seeing how the market developed quickly through auctions, these auctions have been successful and they have been the driver, as I mentioned, for not only bioelectricity but all renewable energy in Brazil. Whenever the government doesn't include bioelectricity in an auction, the amount of bioelectricity built in the next few years decreases, and then when the government resumes and includes bioelectricity again in the auctions, the amount of electricity projects built increases dramatically. So designing an auction in a way that makes sense, in a way studying examples of other countries that have been successful, making the PPA bankable, and making sure that the government provide those guarantees somehow for currency and for offtake of the PPA, I think is key. I think this is something that has been happening successfully in several countries, and as I mentioned many times, the most recent example is Argentina. So I think this is a good way to go. We've seen a different policy before in Chile that was more to do with targets, but they had mandatory targets for each one of the technologies, and then the big generators, the utilities, would have to pay fees and penalties for not complying. This is another option. This was successful in Chile for introducing the first projects, and they did meet all their targets. But most recently, Chile started conducting auctions themselves as well. So I think this would be my conclusion.
Can I just briefly follow up on this? So on the one hand, you say PPAs, and that could be combined then with what is usually combined with some sort of a feed-in tariff, and then on the other hand, something that's more reminiscent of a portfolio standard, a bioelectricity portfolio standard. What are, maybe just as a brief summary, what are the ups and downs of the tool? Like, what can you say about that?
The ups and ups for auctions is that you provide a clear signal of a stable 20-year PPA for investors, so a long-term view on investment that has been very attractive to investors, and so this is something positive. And then you provide a competition as well, so you're not going to be paying the ceiling price. You provide a ceiling price, and then the developers bid for the lowest contract available. The downside of these auctions is that if not designed correctly, making sure that only projects and developers that are audited and creditworthy are able to bid. Some adventurers may participate and bid very low prices that projects that cannot be built. So a way to make sure that does not happen or minimize that is to put very high penalties for investors or projects not complying with construction milestones and being online and commissioned on time, like financial penalties, guarantees that that must be put in place to be able to participate in the auction, to be able to sign the PPA. These are like 1 to 5% of the total capex of the project, and also penalties of not being able to participate in these regular auctions in the country as well is something that is very important. The thing with RPSs is that if they're not mandatory and they're not penalties, then they're usually
Ineffective.
very ineffective. Yes, that's what we've seen.
I have one question that you haven't touched on, and then we turn it over to Kai. Obviously, for countries, it's often an incentive to have local participants in the market, to have local companies win bids, say in auctions, and that has often been a problem, because if you do these larger public tenders, that requires, the human, the financial resources to prepare for them and to take part in them, and there's many different facets, obviously, to this. How do you see this problem also in the markets that you have looked into, and are there any mechanisms that can be applied so to make sure that local project developers can compete with some level of confidence in public tenders?
I think yes, and I've seen, and here in Brazil is clear, and I've seen in other countries as well, is partnerships between foreign companies that don't know the market and want to get in with local companies. It always works much better than when the foreign company comes in by itself. And the first PV auction, for example, in Brazil that we had in 2014, all the main winners were foreign companies that had no experience in Brazil, but were very experienced in solar, like Canadian Solar, Solar Direct, which is a company that was recently bought by ENGIE, GDF Suez. And these are like Sun Edison, which wasn't present in Brazil. And these companies ended up bidding very low prices. They didn't understand the PPA very well. It wasn't successful. And a lot of these projects won't get built because they didn't know the country. And another example is Argentina as well. I have a few clients that participated in the bid. And from what I heard from them is that the main winners of the auction ended up being actually local companies, either local companies by themselves or local companies in partnership with foreign companies. The big foreign companies that were by themselves did not end up winning the auction, specifically in Argentina, from reports that I've been getting from clients of mine that participated.
So that means that such a say a local content requirement or something like that that we've seen on the technology side, you wouldn't argue that's necessary on the project development side, or would you?
I don't see it as useful, but as mandating it, but because I think it would just complicate things. But I do understand that these foreign companies are learning that it's better for them if they want to get in these markets to partner with these local companies, because it just makes sense. Like, these local companies know better how to develop these projects better, have to secure land. It's not something easy that you can do remotely.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Camilla. This was great. I think, I hope it's agreeable that we change the agenda somewhat and turn it over to Kai right away. In the interest of time, we can close a little bit earlier. We can make sure you're all not starving at your desks. Kai, are you with us? If so, then I would like to introduce you. If you could just give me a quick sign. Are you there?
Yes, I am here, and now my microphone seems to be working as well.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Kai. Yes, thanks, Kai. We can hear you. So let me introduce you briefly. Kai Schaubach is a German compatriot of mine. He actually sits just 200 away from where I am. I am currently in Germany myself, in Berlin. He's in Leipzig, where he is the leader of the Markets and Utilizations Working Group at the German Biomass Research Center. German abbreviation is DBFZ. And Kai has been working on bioenergy and other renewable energies for a long time, more than 10 years of experience. I ran into him, as we just realized when we started the session, a year and a half or so ago at a Caribbean conference, He worked for CARICOM, for the Caribbean Community, on bioenergy assessments, but he also worked here in Germany on the German Renewable Energy Act. He coordinated some European research, quite large consortia actually with many different participants. So he has a broad overview of the issue, as well as some very detailed knowledge, particularly of markets and policies for bioelectricity. So it's a really great opportunity we're having here, having you with us, Kai. Thanks a lot for joining us. Thanks for your patience. But now the floor is yours. We're looking forward to your presentation on legal frameworks for bioelectricity and financial incentives. And I think we're going to hear a little bit about safety boundaries as well. Thank you. Kai, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. All right. I hope you can see my screen now. Thanks for the kind introduction. The German Biomass Research Center, DBFZ, it's an abbreviation nobody can remember. The German name, Deutsches Biomasseforschungszentrum Gemeinnützige GmbH, even less so, but I hope you will remember the green. What we do at DBFZ, if I may explain a little bit about ourselves, is all about bioenergy and also bioeconomy, and we want to integrate that in a sustainable economic system in a secure, clean, and integrated way, which we call now smart bioenergy. The objective is a carbon-neutral bioeconomy based on renewable resources. And just to give you a hint about our history, we were established in 2008, but the history goes back even before that. The original company has been founded in the 1950s. We are now about 180 people working here, and we are owned by the Ministry for Food and Agriculture, but we have a lot of projects not financed by the ministry. That is actually just a small part, so we are open for any kind of research. Our research is based on three, let's say, technology sectors. One is the biochemical conversion. Here you can find the biogas anaerobic digestion part, and we have the thermochemical conversion with all the combustion technologies, but also torrefaction, hydrothermal processes, and so on. And biorefineries, they deal with biofuels especially, and biochemicals. The department which I work for is the Bioenergy Systems Department, and here we look at broad issues like sustainability, markets, policies. When we talk about bioenergy, we look first on the value chains, which you can see here. We look at the land use, biomass production, then we go to the biomass supply, move on to the conversion part, then we have the distribution, and then the conversion. The final products are transport fuels, electricity, and heat or cold. And as you can see, there are a lot of options also from the biomass side, the supply side, and the different products you can have and processes. So it's quite a complex matter, and when you look into policies, of course, you have somehow to address all these issues, which is not always easy, as you probably know better than I do. The project which I was working on and which Alex mentioned in the Caribbean was financed by the GIZ RITA project, RITA signifying renewable energy and energy efficiency technical assistance. And we did a research on the assessment of bioenergy resource potentials, framework conditions, technology, and some example projects. So the actual legal framework assessment was just one part, and here you can see what other parts there were, and you can access all these documents, which are quite extensive if you're interested in, and the link will be I will include that in the presentation if you get that. So it's much more extensive than I can present here today. When talking about bioenergy and policy, it is always important to see the motivation behind it. So, and while talking about the COP21 goals and so on, sustainability is always an issue on the political agenda on a high level, but when you look into the actual motivations, that isn't one of the main issues. What we have seen as issues, and these are just have been indicated by our Caribbean counterparts, is high prices for fossil fuels, leading to very high prices for electricity. Sometimes the highest in the world, up to, I think it was 52 US cents per kilowatt hour. And this is just incredible, especially when you compare it to the level of income in some of these countries. Then we also have problems with landfill capacities and pollution. One of the examples was in Guyana, where they had projected a landfill for 20 years and it was filled after half the time. So diverting bio-waste from landfills is not only creating value in terms of electricity and internal markets, but also you have side effects, for example, extending the lifetime of landfills. We had also the motivation of odor mitigation from pig farmers. So it was quite unexpected. He said, well, smell, and if you burn the biogas which you produce, it's okay with me. So he was not really interested, this farmer, in energy. It was a side effect. He wanted to get rid of the smell. Well, then another motivation was pollution of the environment, creating better environments for the inhabitants, for the residents, and also for tourists. Tourism being one of the major sectors for income in the Caribbean. Enhancing internal markets, I mentioned that one. Farmers get new perspectives. We have heard also about the problems sugarcane farmers have, and this is not only true for Jamaica, but all the small islands having a hard time competing with larger farms and companies. So one thing that is not on the agenda for many is a flexible power source, which bioenergy can provide. It's not about providing baseload anymore. When you look at high shares of renewable energy from wind and solar, you have a huge load of fluctuating energy. So, and to balance that to the actual demand and to keep the grid stable, you need flexible power sources, flexible customers also, and of course the options to store energy. And bioenergy can do a lot for you in this regard. This is one of the main issues we look into in Germany now too. Just a short view on the potential side, because when you look into policies, it's always important to have the data. And Devin Gardner of the energy unit of the CARICOM, he said it's like navigating in the dark right now, because he doesn't know the potentials and he doesn't know what kind of biomass plans are there. And so when creating policies without knowing what the sector looks like, you go wrong quite easily. So what we did was collecting potentials and also showing the gaps which you have, because not all the data are available. So we looked into the agricultural products, then residues related to the agricultural products, and also into the animal manure potentials. So we have done this for the 16 countries, 15 from CARICOM, including the Dominican Republic. And these reports are also available with potential locations for each of the CARICOM members. Yeah, availability of data, it's a problem, and this is one of the answers we got when asking for data. It was just, sorry, there are no data available. So one of the issues when you deal with policy and creating sustainable pathways for bioenergy is setting up a monitoring system on the bioenergy potentials and their change, and also maybe monitoring the fulfillment of sustainability goals, which is important, if not, well, the main issue, but it's not on the agenda. Policies in the Caribbean are influenced on different levels. The CARICOM level, being the main supranational body, has formulated the CARICOM energy policy, and based on this, they formulated the energy roadmap and strategy called CSERMS, and Alexander, I think he is very familiar with this one and could probably lead a session on this by himself. The CSERMS creates concrete actions and measures to fulfill the policy objectives. So it's a two-step. First, you have the vision, the goals, and then you define the concrete measures. Yeah, exactly. Then, at a level below that, you have in the Caribbean the OECS, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, consisting of 7 members right now, and they tried to create the ESERA, the Eastern Caribbean Energy Regulatory Authority, which was or is a project by the World Bank. It has been prolonged by 2 years and will end in 2018, as seen today. And well, the obstacle here is that the OECS members hesitate to commit to this regulatory authority. It's always a very difficult issue, sharing power. It doesn't matter which part of the world you look. One of the best examples maybe is the European community, as you have well seen in the news over the last years. So well, it's also true for the OECS. Then we went down to the national level in this project to evaluate the fitness of the legal frameworks. This was done mostly also by a colleague of mine on the project, Elliot Lincoln. He's based in Antigua, and we decided to define 3 main areas which we need to take care of. There are a lot of other policy issues to be touched, but these are the main issues we thought are well, should be looked at. The one is the electricity offtake, so you have to have access to the grid and well, to the markets as well. But on small islands, there is no actual market, but a central entity well, regulating electricity. So then you have to have some sort of economic incentive, which are mostly feed-in tariffs, and also talked about power purchase agreements you need to. So the second area is the biomass supply chains, which we analyzed from the legal frameworks. Points are here: waste management practices, and the other sources like agriculture, industry, and so on. And when you look at the end of a value chain, you have the digestate, for example, from some of the biogas processes, which you can use as an organic fertilizer, and also the ash from combustion processes. And something that has not explicitly, well, is not very specific to bioenergy is the enabling environment. Here we also used assessments from the World Bank, so how easy it is to set up new business, which you most of the time need for creating bioenergy or new bioenergy value chains or supply chains. And this includes access to land and planning permissions, also ease of doing business. Because well, if you cannot set up a business fast and sufficient, people will refrain from that. And as you can see here, we have, well, we came up with a map showing which countries have beneficial conditions in these areas, and so you can see which are the most beneficial ones. And I have this one on big here. So the countries being very beneficial in all 3 areas, Jamaica, Nicanor, and Betsy are probably quite pleased to hear this. Then we have Belize and Barbados, who are the most beneficial when it comes to bioenergy from the analysis of the policy documents framework. So then we have this group here, Dominican Republic, Guyana, and Grenada, who have beneficial circumstances for electricity offtake and biomass supply chains, but lack a bit in the enabling environment. So this is something they might have to look into to promote bioenergy in their countries too. So this is just an overview about the 16 countries and their beneficial legal frameworks. The main legal obstacles we identified were that sometimes you don't have a specific ministry or body which you can contact or which is in power of regulating renewable energies or bioenergy. It was sometimes hard even to get in touch with people or identifying who is responsible in some countries. In one case, I think it was the Ministry of Economy or no, Tourism and Economy. So on islands, you have limited, let's say, manpower to handle things, and so ministries are often compacted or yes, they have different tasks which sometimes do not connect to each other. So yeah, this is a problem that they have to divide their attention between different areas of policy. So then we have the problem of utilities, which are not positioned for IPPs and power purchase agreements. This has something to do with the past when they have concentrated all their power, and of course sometimes it's well, they are reluctant to let go of that power, and also some of the utilities are even not owned by people on the island, so it's external powers having an interest in keeping the conditions stable. And we faced the problem here that everybody knows it, but not everybody is talking about it. Someone called it the elephant in the room. So, but some of the countries have tackled this problem. Closely connected to this is the explicit regulation for electricity from biomass, which we have heard already about. And well, sustainability and environmental regulations are often not in place, which could be an incentive for bioenergy. For example, we have seen it also in Guyana that there are no regulations, and the rivers could be polluted, and all the coconut shells, for example, were thrown into the river, and even well, being an obstacle for the ships and other vessels, and well, it was okay. There were no regulations against it. So having these environmental regulations in place might also be beneficial for bioenergy routes. Jamaica, we have heard about it. We have very beneficial conditions, and if I might just wrap it up in these a few points, the power generation was liberalized in 2004. Please correct me if some of these figures or information are not up to date. Then we have government support for the grid connection. And there are a lot of other support measures for renewable energy. For example, there's an authority, the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Department, which provides studies and pilot projects. And then we have the SRC, supporting biodigesters and clearly defined processes. So which creates trust and shows legitimacy for renewable energy government structures. There's an independent energy sector regulator, which is also very important. And when you look at the sources, biomass sources side, there's the National Solid Waste Management Authority, which, well, focuses on providing information or providing the biomass for possible bioenergy users. This all resulted in a 68% of electricity from well, classical fuels, let's say, and the rest is provided by IPPs. And this is a figure from 2013, which might be even higher right now. So yeah, Jamaica is a place to look for when it comes to implementing bioenergy chains. Now let's go to the other side of the ocean, Germany. We have large shares of bioenergy, and I want to shortly display how this was done here. Talking about legal frameworks, this is in German, but just to show you, all these small boxes are different regulations and laws you have in Germany. Here on this side you have the European level with strategy papers and guidelines and so on, which you have to consider. On a national level you have the concept for energy of our government. Then you have a whole range of laws and also a whole range of regulations. And all these have to somehow integrate into the overall strategy, and they have to link to create an enabling framework. So it's quite a complex matter. The central tool is the Renewable Energy Act. In German it's called EEG. If you come across sometimes it was established in the year 2000 for all renewable energies, so not only for biomass but also for wind, solar, geothermal, hydro, and only focusing on technologies which generate mainly electricity. Gas from landfills and water treatment plants are also covered. I just learned that we in Germany have about 10,000 water treatment plants, and they are aiming at well, entering the electricity market as well. What the Renewable Energy Act does is regulating for all these different kinds of bioenergy, the feed-in tariffs and the allocation mechanism. I will come to that just in a moment. The market access, because we don't have a central facility providing the energy, but we have different kinds of market and different products for electricity. The bioenergy or renewable energies were exempt from this market to create a let's say incubator for renewable energies where they can grow and mature, and also the technical grid access was also regulated. There have been amendments in 2004, 2009, and then you can see the amendment periods have become shorter as the market has become very dynamic. Then we have 2012, 14, and the latest one is 2017, which depicts a well, a paradigm change, but I will come to that also later on. This looks quite complicated, but the main issue here is how is the tariff, the feed-in tariff paid? And Camilla also explained how it works in Brazil. In Germany, we have a similar system. You have the RE power plant, renewable energy power plant, who gets the tariff, and the transmission grid operator is responsible for organizing this money. This is done by once putting all the renewable energy or the electricity on the spot market, selling it there, and the difference between the prices they achieve here and what the power plant operator actually gets is taken from all end users. There are some industrial customers who are exempt from this, or they pay less because they have a high usage of electricity, and paying the full fee for the renewable energies would put them into a dangerous position. Their competitiveness would be would be reduced by well, paying the full levy. So this is how it works in Germany. So it's no tax money which goes into these feed-in tariffs. This has resulted in a dramatic increase of renewable energy. You can see it here from 1990 up to 2014, and this is where all the renewable energies, and the green part you can see here is the bioenergy part. But that's not the end of the line. We could go even further than that. When we look into a bit deeper into this, this is slide of 2014. When we look at all the renewable energies and the final energy consumption, we have 12.8% of renewable energy. This is not only electricity. Electricity is for 2015 about 30%. So this is also transportation, fuels, and heat. And from this part, we have 12.8% renewable, and 7.8 comes from biomass. So biomass is a very important issue in the energy sector, and especially the renewable energy. So, and as I mentioned, this could go even further. The biomass use has increased dramatically, and we could even go beyond this, having different kinds of bioenergy and sources like agricultural biomass, energy crops, which are hotly discussed, and some might be imported. Well, as a policy, we monitored also the effects of this policy. And when you see at the Renewable Energy Act of 2000, 250 new plants were built per year, enabled by a fee for 20 years in the priority connection. Then we had the amendment, which led to 450 new plants per year. The next EG 2009, which was the most beneficial one, we had even 1,000 new plants per year in bioenergy. Most of them were biogas plants for anaerobic digestion. So, and the EG, the recent one, put an end to that because it was just too successful, this policy. So there were issues coming the way which needed to be dealt with, and so they reduced the feed-in tariffs and other beneficial circumstances. So we only had 300 new plants per year, and with the new Renewable Energy Act, which changed to auctions, it will be even less. So, and we, well, we had heard the discussion between Alex and Camilla on auction systems. The fears in Germany about this system were also that only big players were the ones who win, and so they introduced into the new law some regulations. For example, citizen projects, they get special tariffs, and also small plants are exempt from the auction systems. So the variety of actors in the field is preserved, which has been established in the last years. And how that works, we will see, because the Renewable Energy Act will come into force next year, and the feed-in tariffs, as I explained, will be changed to auction systems. So what we have now in Germany is about 8,000 biogas plants with a capacity of 3.4 gigawatt, and another 240 plants using solid fuels, mostly wood, also scrap wood, and they amount to another, I think, 3.2 or 3.4 gigawatt. Yeah, and you can see here the development, and the fear we have for this installed power is that it will be reduced over the years when there is no alternative for the especially biogas plant operators. When the tariff system runs out, the 20-year guaranteed fee, then there needs to be another option, and so people are looking now for new markets, new power products, and maybe side effects of their production. Yeah, we will see how successful that will be. And there is a lot of potential. We have analyzed this in detail for Germany. So what you can see here is already used technical potential, and this number here, 30.2 million tons of dry mass, is what we still have available in Germany, only in residues. I'm not talking about energy crops, which we could still turn into energy. So on this would amount to about 3% of the total energy demand of primary energy consumption in total. Not talking only about electricity. So it would be a waste if we waste this waste, if you let it put me this way. Yeah, just one more slide on the potential we could have of the gross electricity consumption. What we want to have is an increase of about 45% in 2025 when you look at the electricity consumption. So we hope it will not only be solar and wind, but also bioenergy, and with bioenergy being the flexible power option, which also allows storage. The problem we face, as I mentioned before, is the differences in the loads. When you have high shares of, you can see it here, just a second, of wind power and then solar. This is 1 week depicted. So you have wind power and you have solar just feeding in whenever wind blows and the sun shines, and this is the actual load you have. And the capacity we need is this one, to deliver this residual load according to the demand. And this is one of the incentives for bioenergy, being one of the options of this. So this is where the market is moving now to, and also the regulations offering incentives for more flexible bioenergy production. So, and this is tackled, as I said, in the regulations, and it will be even more challenging when we see wind and solar being the main sources of energy, or especially electricity, in the future. Right. This was my presentation, and I now give back the floor to Alex and to the discussion. I think the microphones are still muted.
Hello, Kai. This is Ana Maria Majano. I'm the other co-chair of the bioelectricity community practice. Nice to meet you this way. We have some comments from
Sorry, Ana Maria, you're gone. Sorry, I was muted. Sorry, go ahead, Ana Maria. Are you still there?
Yes. Sorry, no, just I just wanted to ask then the colleagues if they have some comments, and we have Ignacio Figoli from Uruguay who wants to ask a question or make a comment. Ignacio, please, and then Marina Solanas. Ignacio, go ahead.
Yes, I was writing a great presentation. Now I have any question. Have you any experience in wood gasification to produce the syndiesel by Fischer-Tropsch process?
Yes, we do. There have been a lot of initiatives, large initiatives on that, but they have not proven that successful yet. Due to some technical issues. It works very fine in laboratory scale or pilot scale, but when you want to have a continuous process with a large output, then it becomes challenging. But in principle, this is feasible. But the industrial scale is still a bit tricky.
I ask you that because here now we are going to have a the third pulp mill, UPM, and we export cellulose, but nowadays we are talking about biorefineries, add value in the chain, in the forestry value chain. I think the biomass, the bioenergy have a big challenge to reduce the distance, the transport, the logistic problem that have biomass. So another question I ask you is, you're working in different models of planting like agroforestry. So to have a sustainability system, so to include social, environment, and economic model, so to reduce the distance between the producer of the biomass and these new biorefineries. You are working in that issue?
Yes, we do. The sustainability is always tricky. We had in Germany also a large sector, let's say, on plant oil generators or electricity generators using plant oil, but that was cancelled because of insufficient sustainability from palm oil imported from, let's say, Indonesia or other parts, to indirect land use change factors and so on. So this is one of the boundaries which I maybe forgot to mention. When you look into sustainability of forestry, of course, you use firstly residues. There we have the problem not only of low energy density, but also of different qualities, challenging qualities, and there we have different options to upgrade this. One of the projects I was involved in was about torrefaction. This was one of the European projects pushing forward the whole market for torrefaction. So what you do in torrefaction is kind of roast biomass, and then you lose a lot of the volatile matter which is included. The structure is destroyed within the wood residues. You can compact it to pellets which have almost coal-like qualities. So they are easy to transport. You can store them outside, and you can transport them over large distances. Another technology which does this as well, but is not that far advanced yet as torrefaction, there are hydrothermal processes. So what you do here is rather not a roasting, but a cooking. So this is another option for transporting. And this torrefaction, for example, works also for straw, which already has a low density or a low water content. So yeah, and another option is a decentralized pre-processing, which we looked in, for example, for pyrolysis. So you have the first part of the pyrolysis decentralized, and then you transport the pyrolysis oil, for example, to a central processing plant, which converts the oil there into different products like biofuel or chemicals. But this this is not industrial available yet, so it's probably more research topics than interesting for implementation in countries.
Maybe another question. When you talk about the gasification, it's very important.
Sorry, can we, because we have 3 people in line?
Yes.
Can we wait a little bit, please, for the next question so that we let Marina and Nicanor ask questions also, please?
Sure.
Okay, yeah, just please press the button to raise your hand again to keep you in the line after Marina and Nicanor.
Yeah, maybe with these technical issues we can discuss outside of this session, maybe too. So Ignacio, if you write me an email, we can maybe talk later on about these, gasification and torrefaction issues.
Okay, thank you, Kai. Marina, I'm going to open your mic. Go ahead, Marina. Marina.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm here.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria, and thank you very much, Kay, for such a wonderful presentation. So I have questions regarding municipal waste. The first one is regarding liquid municipal waste and at the wastewater treatment plants. I know that Germany has a number of wastewater treatment plants that are performing co-digestion and cogeneration. And my question is, which were the mechanisms to make these projects happen, and who were the initial most interested parties? Were the municipalities or maybe some private parties that saw the opportunity of including some other organic wastes into the wastewater treatment plants and aerobic digesters? And the second question is about municipal solid waste, which is the number of MSW to electricity plants that you have, and what was their success?
About the water treatment plants, yes, we have about 10,000 of them in Germany, and it is now slowly evolving that they take part in the well energy market. For now, these focus on using the energy they produce from the sewage sludge for covering their own needs, which is now, I think, in average can be up to 3/4. So, but they are aiming at even raising that part, so they will actually be produce more energy than they need, but this is seldomly the case. And I think I'm not quite sure because it's not the area I concentrate on in my work. But the incentive is that they generate additional income by this. So the more they produce and actually take part in the market, they might make more money and support the overall generation. Because what they do in Germany now is they invest heavily in the water treatment plants. It's called a fourth stage, which cleans the water from very small particles, hormones, or medicine. So this is a new issue, and so they will be even more expensive, and generating additional income through bioenergy and even cogeneration. That's one incentive. And on the other hand, yes, most municipalities, being a public body, they want to show, or they should show, their leading role in using bioenergy and renewable energy and sustainable concept in all. There are, as I have heard, there are sometimes the people, the managers, who take a personal interest in doing so, and they are one of the main drivers behind it, because it's a bureaucratic thing, and they just would run as they do, and if you don't have someone who is really interested in the change, then nothing much will change. So this was the answer to your first question, and the second one, could you repeat that one?
Sure. Yeah, it was about municipal solid waste. How many plants do you have that generate electricity from anaerobic digestion of municipal solid waste, and what was the success of them?
They have been quite successful in terms of, well, we have this system in Germany that the households and well, also other parties in cities, they separate their waste, and so you have separate waste streams for bio-waste. So, and also residues from restaurants and kitchens and so on are collected and put into anaerobic digestion plants, and I think most of the potential has been used here, and they're talking about well, cascading uses, for example, composting it and using it in parallel for biogas. I'm not quite sure about the amount of plants, and this is also difficult to monitor because on the one hand, you have regulations and permits, and there are, I think, more than 1,000 plants permitted to use these kind of wastes, but not all of them do. So it's very difficult to pinpoint how many plants there are actually using these residues. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Now I'm going to open the microphone for Nicanor. Hello. Please go ahead with your question. Please open your mic. It's closed right now. It's off.
Hello.
Go ahead. Yes. Hello.
Yes, thank Anna. Very interesting presentation. Very informative. I'm definitely going to check out that report. My question to you, though, has to do with the nature of the business model that is utilized in Germany as it relates to
your connection is very bad.
you know,
Sorry.
Given that
I think we lost you for a little while.
You're not hearing me clearly?
Can you repeat now, please?
All right.
Yes.
Hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah, my question has to do with the nature of the business model that is used for biomass to electricity in Germany that makes the project financially feasible, right? As it compares to what can be done in the Caribbean region, given that we are a temperate, we're in a tropical zone where the use of heat from these facilities are not, necessarily considered, which we believe makes turning biomass to electricity financially viable.
Yes. Most of let's talk about biogas plants, because the solid plants based on combustion are a totally different story. When you look into biodigesters generating electricity and heat, we had in Germany, in one of the former Renewable Energy Acts, a regulation for minimum use of heat. So people had to use at least 60% externally of the heat they produced, and they would get a extra bonus for this. We had a very complicated system of this calculation of the feed-in tariff. They were composed of different parts, depending on your technology, depending on the feedstock you use. So more sustainable feedstock were well incentivized more with higher fees. This was one of the options using heat. The other consideration was that these plants are not economically feasible without using heat. So they tried to put pressure on the operators to use it, and they got very creative when it comes to using the heat for especially heating fields for asparagus as one example. So they could harvest the asparagus earlier. So most of the biogas plants in Germany are operated by farmers. So they were using their own residues, maybe using others, and combining manure with corn. Because for manure it has a very low energy content, but it was paid very well because it was economically, or was from an environmental point of view considered very beneficial when it was used. So the main incentive to use heat was done by the Renewable Energy Act, asking for it or demanding the usage of heat.
Thank you, Kai. If there are some more questions, please raise your hand. Kai, I have a question myself. I have been working in the energy sector in Central America for a while, and we have very successful cases of countries promoting the use of renewables. Um, Photovoltaic, geothermal, and also there is a tradition, let's say, for several decades of in some countries of using sugarcane bagasse for electricity generation. But when it comes to using agricultural residues or forest residues, is a different story. And of course, as you have mentioned, there are several obstacles, probably for biomass, electricity, and energy generation in general, than others. And I think one of them is the fact that policy making for this development goes beyond the energy ministries. You also have to get ministries of in charge of forests and agriculture and other issues on board to really promote the development of biomass to its potential.
Definitely.
So,
Yes.
so I would like to ask your comments about that, because for me and for Let's Lack, that's a very important issue. How we bring together the people beyond the ministries of energy, which I think, of course, are already many of them convinced that they have to do this. But what is the experience in other countries that you know, and also in Germany, to bring together these different policymaking bodies that are used to working in silos to advance in biomass and energy development.
Yes, I think the first motivator would be that such a policy is located at top level. So the top level of the government is promoting this and forcing renewable energy, then the ministries are most likely well to work together better. And the second thing is maybe to show the the benefits. But it's always a difficult thing because working together always means sometimes means that you have to share power, and ministries are not always in favor of this. So it's a tricky thing, and it's not only about the ministries. It's about a whole range of stakeholders you have to involve, especially the public. And so you can also have a demand from the public if you inform them, if you involve them in bioenergy projects up front, so they might ask for renewable energy, bioenergy, and this will be another motivator or driver for ministries to work together. So how you operationalize this, how to get the ministries to work together is, I don't think there's a general recommendation, but maybe if you identify people which are motivated to do this and want to change things, then it's good to identify these motivated people and get them to work together. And this is probably a good starting point.
I think that's very important, Kai, because in our community of practice, we have a group of people interested in moving forward biomass electricity generation in their countries. And we have a very good combination of people from the governments, others like Marina, for example, from NGOs, others from utilities. And as you say, I think it's important to take into account the power of the public asking for policies to foster certain activities that they consider important. I have another question from Marina. Marina, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Ana Maria. Yes, I was wondering, particularly for wastewater treatment plants, which is the economic incentive that they receive to be more beneficial for them to perform co-digestion and co-generation as opposed to not doing nothing, as it's the case for all plants in Argentina. I'm wondering if the gate fee of landfills for those organics that are being brought to the wastewater treatment plants are too high, and that's the reason why, for example, a wastewater treatment plant gets its greatest benefit from the tipping fee as opposed to just the electricity prices, or the main source of revenues are actually the electricity that they sell to the grid, and then what they save. What is the main driver for them to do this, the main economic driver?
This depends, of course, on the country. There's no general answer to this. Talking about
I'm sorry. I was talking about Germany. Sorry.
Well, we have a regulation that you cannot dump any biological waste on landfills. That's the end of the story. So you have to do something with the waste, and that goes into all sorts of biogas plants, not the ones in wastewater treatment plants, because they have a different technology, and what you have in organic waste from households and so on, you have dedicated biogas plants of different sizes to utilize this. You might even have other uses like composting or material use for this for this material. So diverting bio waste from landfills does mean that this waste goes to wastewater treatment plants. It's well open to all, and there are different models behind that.
I see. And do you know what is the main source of revenue in these kinds of projects at a wastewater treatment plant? Is it the tipping fee, or is it the electricity revenues?
The tipping fee at the wastewater treatment plant. No, in Germany it works a bit different. You don't. Well, they are integrated into the central system, the wastewater treatment plant. So they collect their fees. This is the main income. Their main job is cleaning the water, and everybody who uses water and well has basically a flat or a house, they pay for cleaning the water depending on the amount of wastewater they create. It's measured, and so they pay according to this, including some fee for additional rainwater, which is caught by their area in which they live, and this is also well put into the canalization, and the wastewater treatment plant gets its revenue from this. The electricity is just a tiny minor source of income.
Thank you very much, Kai. We have Ignacio. Please go ahead.
No, some comment. In Australia, it's a company that a fishery that work with macroalgae. That the macroalgae is doing a bioremediation, and with the this algal biomass, they do some type of pellets to produce bioelectricity. That's a new bioenergy. Some comments. That's it.
Thank you, Ignacio, for the input. So if there are no more questions, I would really like to thank Kai for for his contribution to this community of practice. As you have been able to see from and hear from the session, we are a group of people interested in working on different areas of either policy or private sector or research, trying to foster the development of bioelectricity in several Latin American countries. And the idea of this community of practices is to exchange experiences, to of course learn from each other, and especially learn from people like you and Camila, who are so generous to share your knowledge and the result of your work with us. So thank you, Kai. I hope that we can continue to have you involved in this community.
I would gladly contribute more.
Thank you, thank you. So I will pass the microphone to Alex for some logistics, especially about the in-person workshop that we are planning, and where we hope to have many of you there. Go ahead, please, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria. Ana Maria is really my big partner in crime here on this, and it's not the first project we do together. And you can tell whenever I have problems, like in this case, my microphone doesn't work, she jumps in and she takes over. So thank you very much, Ana Maria. That was really great. I think we had a wonderful session today, and we all learned a lot. I can definitely say that for myself. And thank you for our presentations. First of all, thank you, Camila and Kai. Thank you also to all of the members for a lively discussion. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but just give a quick overview of what's next. So can you show the next slide, please, Philip? Yeah, I want to make sure that you are all aware of the community resources that we are using and that we intend to use even more so in the future. We are using basically two technologies here, two software programs, if you want. Or one is an online social media group on LinkedIn. Camila and Kai, we would love you to join this group. It's a closed discussion group, so you would have to contact the administrator for this group, Phil Killeen, who has been organizing this session here as well. He's also running the LinkedIn group. We're using the LinkedIn group really as a private discussion group to share all sorts of material that our members want to share, as well as the material that has been used here during the online sessions, and we're going to use it also to bring everybody up to speed for the workshop in Costa Rica. So please contact Phil for getting access to it. It would be great to have you in this group. Secondly, we're using Dropbox for larger material, background information. If you sign up to Dropbox and access our folders, you will see that we have individual folders for each participating country in this group, where we have summary dossiers, where we have key policy and legislative documents, the studies that we have found. So please make use of it. It's a lot of work to assemble these documents, to assemble the background information. This goes particularly to the country leads now. Please access your folders, make sure that we have all the key studies that you are using available there, and contribute new ones that we are not yet aware of. This will help us really to continue to run this community successfully. Next slide, please. If this was too quick for you, we're sharing the presentations so you can follow the links there, or just contact Phil Killeen directly. You all have his emails. He's the one who's sending out the invitations to the sessions, and I'm sure he has been in touch with you individually probably by now as well. So the logistics for the workshop, as mentioned when we started this last virtual session today, this is the great point in time when we finally come together. Some of you have met already around the Panama meetings a couple of weeks ago. You know that we had to postpone the meetings because we couldn't get travel resources in time of that meeting in Panama, and it was important that everybody who wanted to attend the workshop is able to, and that we can support you your travel. So it's great to know that some of you have met and have had, from what I hear, good exchanges. This workshop on the 16th of December in San Jose in Costa Rica is the one time where we bring the whole group together. And the goal of this workshop is really to work with you, to bring you together with international experts on the design of concrete policies, on measures and on investment tools that can work in your context. So this is a one-day workshop where we really want to dive deeply into your country's situation, and where we want to see how we can be helpful to moving your agenda in your country forward. There's different design models that we're currently looking into, starting with looking into country, or having presentations on country by country, and having all of us putting our heads together on each individual country, or doing it rather in the order of technologies. It's likely that we're going to play some of these ideas with you well before the workshop to see what you think is most helpful here. So stay tuned for that. But what's important for now is that you have the day on your calendar, that you make sure that you can join us on December 16th. We know it's relatively late in the year. It's just a week before Christmas. We're aware of this. But there is a procedure that the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which contributes some of its resources to making this workshop happen, has in place to provide you with travel money. And the key procedure for this is they need 45 days ahead of the meeting to process your travel requests. So please keep your eyes open, respond as quickly as you can to the emails that you receive from Phil about how to then apply for this money, to make sure that we have all of you there who can and want to attend on December 16th. We're very grateful that the Ministry of Agriculture in Costa Rica has offered to host the meeting. This is wonderful. It's also the city where Ana Maria Majano, who just moderated the last session today, is based. So we're going to have all the local intelligence there on the ground to have a very successful meeting. Yes, that's basically it about the workshop. I'm going to stop here for a second to see whether there's any questions relating to this point in time that I or Phil or Ana Maria can answer right away. Any questions relating to the workshop? Does not seem to be the case. You can contact us by email also, and we can get on the phone with you to make sure we're moving. If there are any barriers here in terms that are in the way of your travel, we can try our best to move them out of the way. So that's it for the workshop. Next slide should be the thank you slide already, Phil. Exactly, that's it. So here you all find our informations again. Ana Maria's and mine as the co-chairs of this, the secretariat. I really want to thank Phil Killeen and Alejandra Granados again for the great work they have done in organizing this. Here you find the contacts also of Camilla and Kai again. So with this, I want to end today's session, which was the longest one we had so far, but from my point of view also maybe the most interesting one, the most exciting one. Camilla and Kai, thank you so much again for joining us, and we're hoping to keep you involved in our future work. Thank you everybody for joining. Session is closed.